India's digital economy runs on data, and behind that data is a new generation of infrastructure leaders. My guest today on the interview is building the backbone of India's cloud and AI ambitions. Sunil Gupta is the co-founder, MD and CEO of Yotta Infrastructure, one of India's fastest growing hyperscalers data center platforms. As India races to become a global digital powerhouse, we ask him, is our data infrastructure ready for the future or not? Sunil, great to have you today on ET Now. Thank you so much for your time. I want to first talk about the big picture. India's consumption is exploding as we know it. Are we building data centers fast enough, or are we already behind the curve?
From a stage where industry was just about 200 megawatt in 2016-17 to a stage where we are 1.4 gigawatt today, which is 7 times. This is a story of last 7 years itself. So I would say it is a phenomenal progress. India has been able to catch up because the need of digitization for enabling 1.4 billion people, of course, is very, very large, much larger compared to any other economy which has got much lesser population. But having said that, if we simply go by the numbers, how much megawatt of data center India has compared to the population, under this metric, India has, let's say, 1.4 gigawatt for 1.4 billion people, while for a country like US, which has got 350 million people, the data center capacity is about 17 gigawatts. So if we simply do the maths, India is still about 1/50th of what a US is. India is still about 1/5 of what a China is. So still a lot of ground to catch up. A lot of built out has happened. A lot of built out is going to come in the market in the next 3 years. But with AI coming in the mix, the equations are continuously changing. We were all projecting that India will become about 3 gigawatt by 2030, and that'll be a good achievement. But with all the latest projections with AI coming in, looks like India will be requiring, and India should be having at least 6 gigawatt by 2030 or 2032. So it's a lot of catching up despite great work done so far.
Right. So, Sunil, how does India's data center capacity today compare with US, with Europe and China? And where are we still falling short?
As I said that if we purely go by the demand tailwinds are very, very clear, and I think they are very, very visible to anybody to see. If India has got 1.4 billion, a country like US has got 350 million people. So we are 4 times more people. And nobody can deny that India is as much digitally enabled today, maybe more compared to even an economy like US. You know, we all are so habitual of using our mobile every second minute, and we are so habitual of creating and consuming content all the time. UPI has done such a great magic. And if we see, while 2 years back, AI was not there at all in India, but what the developments of the last 2 years have happened, lot of sovereign models on local data sets are getting created, and I'm sure many of these models will get launched in the upcoming AI Impact Summit. And many of the use cases across agriculture or education or healthcare or climate, which are citizen facing, will be coming out, and that will be further adding up to the consumption of digital. So demand side, India will always be far, far, far bigger compared to anywhere else in the world. The key point is, how do we build out the capacity to meet this far higher demand which India has compared to any other country. So naturally, the infrastructure also which India need to make, whether it is pure data center, the physical building, or whether it is the compute on the top of that, whether it is a CPU compute or a GPU compute, need to be as much bigger. As I said, a lot of work has been done, but a lot of catching up has to be done. India will have to continue to build, I would say, for next 10 years, more and more data center capacity, more and more compute and GPU capacity to catch up with its own demand. And of course, if India has aspirations, which India has, for not only serving its own AI requirement, but also the AI requirement for rest of the world, the capacity build out has to happen without any restrictions for next 10 years at least.
Right. Sunil, like you rightly said, with AI workloads surging now, how different are AI-ready data centers from traditional ones?
AI runs on special type of chips called GPUs, and these chips, if I talk in a very simple language, they are much, much more powerful, let's say 100 or 1,000 times more powerful than a standard CPU chips which are running in our regular servers, which are running our regular applications like a core banking or a SAP or Oracle or an e-commerce application. When the chip is 100 times more powerful, it is but natural the chip will be consuming lots of power for it to operate, and which consume more power, it will generate a lot of heat. So naturally, it means the amount of cooling required just to cool this chip also will be as much high. And this is the special reason that the data centers which host the chips are supposed to be having much higher power densities, much higher cooling densities, and the overall size and scale of power and cooling in this building is supposed to be 10 times higher or 15 times higher, 20 times higher than the what the traditional building which India has been building or anywhere else we have been building. Just to give you an example, traditional data center used to have a rack unit, where the equipment is kept, which was having a power of, let's say, 6 kilowatt per rack. Uh, AI rack, which is hosting the GPUs, will be having a power like 120 kilowatt per rack, and in coming time, it may become about 250 kilowatt per rack. So you're talking about 20 to 50 times more power in the same rack footprint compared to what the data center was running. This requires a very, very specialized type of data center re-engineering. You are no more talking about cooling the chips through air cooling mechanisms, which we all were doing for last 25 years. You are actually doing something called liquid cooling. You are actually taking water or specialized liquids right up to the rack, terminating them right on the chips, the chip GPUs itself, so that the heat generated is extracted right from there. So these are special impacts coming in. Very, very difficult so many times to retrofit a existing previously built data center into an AI data center. Some people are able to do that. I am also able to do that because of many various reasons. But the data centers of tomorrow, which will be purpose built for AI, will be very, very different. We typically call them AI factories. They'll be extremely power dense and they all will be cooled with liquid cooling.
Right. Sunil, when we talk about, so much infrastructure being laid when it comes to data, it's important to talk about power and sustainability as well, because data centers are power hungry. Can India scale digital infrastructure without hurting its climate goals?
This is something like saying that do we need metros? Because construction of a metro in a city like Mumbai may also result into some cutting of trees or impacting environment in a limited way. Uh, we actually do not count, or I'm sure we also count the lots of benefits, including environmental benefits, will be getting because the vehicular pollution will get reduced because when the mass transportation comes into the lives of people. Same is the case with AI. AI is going to bring in direct benefits into so many facets of our life, improving the agricultural produce of our farmers, ensuring rural education through self-learning through our own pace, ensuring healthcare through precision medicine, ensuring climate, better monitoring and better changes, ensuring, I would say, any and every sector of life, because of the way AI is that machine is developing the code, you are not coding the machine. Practically any and every facet of life is not remaining untouched from AI, and that is a positive side of AI, which is also benefiting the environment as much as it is also, let's say, damaging the environment by consuming lots of power and cooling. So, having said that, the measures, the mitigating steps have to be taken because AI chips will consume lots of power, and that is where I would say globally there is a initiatives, and that is where India is taking, I would say, the bigger lead because we started scaling AI and I mean scaling data centers and now AI, let's say, later than US. So naturally, we had the lead in terms of that we can adopt latest technologies, we can learn from the experiences of others. So to just to give you a few points, what we as DC operators across India are doing is, number one, there are two things which matter. Number one, uh, what is the amount of power you are using? Can you optimize that? Number two, what is the quality of power? What is the type of power you're using? Instead of thermal power, coal based power, can you use green power? In the first case, the amount of power, it depends on two things. One is the chip which you are using is more efficient? Is it using less power for producing the same amount of tokens? This is the job which is lying with people like Nvidia or Intel or AMD who are making the chips, and they are on to this job for last 4 years. Every new chip, for example, which Nvidia is bringing is far more power efficient. It is generating much more tokens for the same amount of power or same amount of dollars. So that is what Nvidia and people like that are doing. As DC operators, what we are doing is that the amount of power which goes into cooling these chips is supposed to be reduced significantly, and that is where we are bringing in technologies like liquid cooling. As far as the which type of power you're using, that is where I think India has got a great advantage, thanks to we being closer to equator, thanks to we having a tropical atmosphere, tropical weather. uh, India has the inherent advantage of being blessed with lots of wind and lots of sun, and that is why India today, out of the total installed capacity of about 500 gigawatt in India, uh, more than 47 or 48% of that power actually is green power. And the CAGR of green power produced in the coming 5 years is going to be much faster than the CAGR of the traditional thermal power. So that is the case on a broad level, that India is actually generating far more green power than anywhere else in the world. So in data centers, what we are doing is that by default, you talk to any industry player, at least 30-35% of the power every industry player is using is a green power, which can be a mix of a solar or a wind, or a or you can say a hydro or a biogas or whatever. As Yotta, because we have put GPUs on a very, very large scale, our response increased much, much bigger. My data center in Navi Mumbai, for example, where most of the GPUs are, is 80% fed by green sources. My data center in Greater Noida near Delhi is actually 100% fed by green sources. You can just see that how I would say we as DC operators are taking it responsibly. Besides my teams which are working on AI technologies and cloud technologies, I have a dedicated team which is only responsible for sourcing power. We have long-term contract with hydropower sources, with wind power sources and solar power sources, and we are ensuring that we constantly keep on increasing the green in our mix. So how do we reduce the amount of power we are using, and how do we use more and more green power? That is how industry is responding to this challenge.
Right. It's also important, Sunil, to talk about cost and competitiveness. What makes India an attractive or expensive destination for global hyperscalers?
First of all, that India has always been the largest market for any and every digital player, whether it is Amazon or Azure or Google, or the businesses which are running on the top of that, which is like YouTube or any of the SaaS services, like or for that matter, social media like a Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? We all know that more than 30-40% of the users on all these platforms are actually Indians. On ChatGPT, by the way, Indians have already become the largest number of users. So India is always the largest or second largest market for all these e-commerce or social media or digital players. So if people have to serve this large demand, which is pure India based demand, that itself justifies hyperscalers and various local players to build out in India, right? Whether or not we also serve the demand, which is not Indian demand, but the demand of other countries being served from India, is a, you can say, top up or icing on the cake. But right now, the Indian demand itself is far, far higher than what India's capacity can serve today. Now, coming to why, about 15 years back, you all used to have a phenomena where while India was still creating lot of data, creating or consuming, but majority of the data center capacity was still outside. Indian website used to be hosted in US or Europe or Singapore. The reason the change has happened and majority of that content now is actually getting hosted in India increasingly, one is obviously the data localization piece, the DPDP Act, and that has actually made many people, for example, RBI has mandated all the financial data has to be hosted in India. There are other sector specific regulations in healthcare, for example. That is one thing which has helped big time. Second is the infrastructure has evolved. 15 years back we could not think of creating large data centers within 18 months of period, getting land allocations, getting all the approvals, getting the power connections, right? Getting a very solid fiber connectivity to our data center so that the connectivity, the is not lost out when the users try to access data center. So in terms of, and by the way, if you will see in the last 7 or 8 years, multiple state governments have come out with data center policies. They have understood, they are attracting, in fact there is a competition between various state governments to attract data center players to the state, because they have understood the direct and indirect impact on the economy and employment of data centers. So because of all this multiplicity of factors, um, building data centers and doing data center and cloud business in India has become far more easier than what it was 15 years back. That is one part. Second is in terms of cost, India scores heavily. Whether you see the cost of the land, underlying land on which you build data center, or you take the cost of constructing the data center physical core and shell, or for that matter, you take the cost of putting in the MEP equipment, what you call as the power or cooling and related equipment in data center. All these elements, India is much cheaper compared to most of the developed economy in the world. Just to give you an idea, the cost of building a data center in India generally is touted as around 5 million to $6 million per megawatt of IT load. That is the typical number you will take in the industry. The same cost, if you take it for a US or a UAE or a Saudi or a Japan or a Korea, that is around 12 to $14 million. So India actually turns out to be almost 50% of the cost compared to this most of the other economies. And that also shows, beside many other benefits, as I said, that India itself is the largest market. So naturally, people, for low latency purposes and to give the best experience to users, they would rather like to host in India. So both from the user experience point of view and also from the point of view of that fundamental structural issues have been resolved, and the cost also is very less. India is fantastic and very attractive destination for anybody to build data centers and clouds in India, whether to serve Indian market or serving the global market.